What is going on, guys? Wally back with another video. In today's video, we're taking a look at something I glossed over in some of the recent videos, and that is primarily Destiny's story. Now, I'm not going to say anything negative about Destiny's story and how it launched, because that is all hearsay and I think subjective to a certain extent, although some of it I think is objective, but it doesn't do me any good or you any good to rehash points that you've already heard. So let's go ahead and take it from Taken King and say, how can they improve upon the story or expand the universe moving forward, do perhaps a better job, and so on and so forth. So I got a couple things that I think I want to bring up and sort of give it to you and give you my opinion on this, and then you can give me your own opinion, formulate it from there, and we can have that kind of conversation. The idea here, once again, is that the story moving forward is that you always have this jumping point, well, bigger and badder bad guys. So you took down Atheon, who's a pretty badass dude. Then you got to fight Crota. Then you got to fight Skolas, and now you fight Oryx. But the difference here is that Skolas and Crota weren't gods. Crota was like a demigod, depends on who you talk to and who interprets the lore, but I like to interpret him as sort of a demigod. Son of a god doesn't really make you necessarily a god too. Some mythologies it does, but let's just say that he's a demigod for this argument. So he's not like a top rung badass, he doesn't control his own dimension, that kind of thing. So that, I think, explains a piece of their jumping point. So you went from Crota to Skolas. Skolas was awesome. I think he was a great character. I think they did him wrong. I think by putting him in the end of Prison of Elders, it was the wrong thing to do. I think that that was ultimately something that was sort of lackluster. It was anticlimactic at the end. You fought him in the story, and the story campaign, I think, was great. That was probably the best story campaign I think they've done in a long time. I would even go as far as say it was better than Taken King. May disagree there, and that's cool. I'm just saying that I think they did a good job of playing up this bad guy and why he is who he is and why he's fighting for what he's fighting for, so on. It's not to say they did a poor job with Oryx, but I think they sort of did Skolas a disservice by saying, okay, you killed him or you beat him, captured him really in the end of the story there, but we're going to put him in Prison of Elders and that's it. Like, you can go fight him there. I mean, it's just silly. I think that Prison of Elders, unfortunately, was a tacked-on experience that they were looking to do that they weren't 100% sure about. And since they probably had deadlines and so on and so forth, they probably had a very difficult job of saying, we wanted to include him in the raid, but we couldn't. We didn't have enough time, so we're just going to include him in Prison of Elders. And I think there were meant to be two different experiences for that. There was meant to be Prison of Elders that was standalone, and then meant to be the raid, which explained more about his potential escape or something else happened. Who knows, right? So again, I think Skolas was a mistake. I think his story, however, was fantastic. Sucks that he's kind of gone now, but the idea here moving forward is that they moved into Oryx, sort of cherry picking some of the better elements from the Skolas story and applying it over into the Taken King story. So you understand who Oryx is, except you have this really confusing cutscene at the beginning that still a lot of people are really questioning and trying to interpret. Personally, I like to think that the queen is not dead and her brother is still alive. Her brother is confirmed still alive in some of the Grimoire cards, but the queen may not be dead, and I'd like to think that she isn't dead. It just doesn't make sense. A lot of the narrative sort of points in that general direction, being like, yeah, well, she's speaking from the past tense about actions that already happened. It doesn't really make sense. Was she speaking from heaven? I don't think so. So she's definitely, I would say, like a 75% chance plus of being alive, still out there. But the story at that point sort of kind of picks up. So what should have been, in my opinion, like the final battle, the most climactic battle, huge space battle where you've got the reef ships and the tower ships and everyone fighting against Oryx together, and Oryx is going down. That would have been cool. Kind of like a Star Wars Return of the Jedi final battle aboard the Death Star type thing, right? That would have been so dope. But they, I guess, thought that was a curveball or something. Perhaps they're planning on to explain it later. I don't know. It's one of those things that sometimes Destiny's story tries to be confusing, to be like witty, I think, or maybe I'm just retarded and I have a small mind. I don't know, but I like to think that sometimes it just doesn't make sense, or it's hard in terms of understanding because it wants to be confusing, it wants to be vague, instead of being like, yes, this is what happened here, this is where this character is now, so on and so forth. I feel like it does, being vague is good sometimes. I think being vague for the future is good. Being vague for the current storyline is not good, because that's the number one thing I think a lot of people have complained about from Vanilla Destiny, is the idea of the story not being concise. It's just very hard to look at and be like, what is going on here? You feel like you have books 1 and 4, but you're missing books 0, 7, 8, 9, 3, 5, and 100. You know, there's just things that are just all out of place, and it's very unfortunate that I think sometimes, I think the writers, and really I think it's Luke Smith and that team, the creative team, trying to figure out the best way to explain the story moving forward. So what I'd like to see personally is, obviously I want to see a more concise story moving forward. That the idea that, look, this is what's happening, this is what's going on now, you have your actions directly impact this story, which is sort of the case for most of it, but I want that to be much more clear. Perhaps present the illusion of choice, or even choice itself, where if, say, you pick you want to side with Cayde over Eris or something, you go down the Cayde storyline, but you can't play the Eris storyline until you finish the Cayde storyline, then obviously you can go back and play it. But the idea was that you somehow pick and you get different storylines. The idea too that maybe there's a morality system implied in the story, that you have actual choices, where maybe there's a Guardian outpost under attack, but your mission is super critical and you cannot waste time, and you have to choose. Maybe you go help out your fellow brothers and sisters, or maybe you're a warlock and decide that your fellow brothers and sisters are all hunters and they probably don't need your help because they're buttholes or something, right? You have that illusion of choice. Ultimately, the story isn't really impacted by those minor decisions, but there's that minor nuance there that you're like, holy shit, I gotta make a decision between helping out my homies or getting this mission done and trying to get this epic reward, and maybe you lose out on that epic reward. Like, make the choice legitimate enough that there is a consequence. Sometimes games like to just present that veil of saying you can choose, but ultimately the story doesn't change. Ideally, I'd like them to say, look, this is canon, this isn't canon kind of thing, but your story along the way is influenced by your character's choices. And then, for the love of God, bring back character voice acting. I know some people really like the mute protagonist, I get that, but this isn't Grand Theft Auto 3 anymore, man. I can't speak for everyone here, I think we want to have a character with a voice, a male or a female, whatever, that has a very powerful voice, a commanding respect for authority. The idea of saying, look, I am a badass, and I say this, not like, emote, dance, shake, point, whatever. That's great. Emotes are great, but they don't convey enough of real emotion between characters. And they've shown that they've done a great job, especially with TTK, to provide those cutscenes for individuals to be like, damn, these characters look cool, and they have their minor nuances. Like Cayde and Eris don't really, maybe not like each other. I think it's more like playful banter, but that's the idea. You know, Cayde has a serious authority figure. Ikora is pretty mysterious, and that's cool. And Zavala is obviously, you know, the military hard ass. So it's cool that they brought those in, and you can sort of glean those from very quick cutscenes. So those are cool things. Those are what I want in the future. I just want to see a more concise story, player choice, player influence, maybe a morality system, something. What do you guys want for Destiny in the future? Destiny story particularly. Let me know in the comments. Hope you guys have a great day. I will see you all later. Peace.